trouble. Time for a bit of Jim Does SuperCoach AFL. That's right, AFL SUPERCOACH is here. We've got week 1 starting next week. Week 0 is already underway. So I wanted to jump on, do a bit of Jim Does SuperCoach AFL Team Reveal. Basically, what I'm going into week 0 with and the changes that we'll likely make after week 0, which is kind of like the interesting part, right? So you have week 1 being the start of AFL SUPERCOACH. We have week 0 basically as a fact-finding mission, which is kind of nice. So I wanted to jump on, have a little bit of look at my team before the week 1 lockout. And it's really cool to have week 0 because it just means a couple of things, right? Because it means that like the week 0 scores aren't counted overall, but it does count for the players' price movements, right? So it's basically a free look, free kick of the tires, see what roles these guys are playing, see what their scoring upside might be in the case of someone like Sam Walsh, etc. And I mean, basically anyone from the 10 week 0 teams this week, you just kind of get a little bit of a snapshot as to what might be going on for their SuperCoach future, which is very cool. It does, however, also mean early buys, which it can be a little bit of a hassle, obviously. I don't know if you need to be stressing about them too much. They do stack up a couple of these good SuperCoach teams, though, in like week 3, that sort of stuff. But because it's best 18 scoring in these buy rounds, I don't go too crazy overboard and making sure I don't have any guys on buys or whatever. I just have it in mind, right? And it's also, you know, worth thinking about, all right, when does that first price cycle hit for some of these teams? Does it hit, for instance, like GWS and St Kilda? They don't have their buy until round 4, so they get 2 price cycle changes before they have a buy, which is good. Versus like some other teams that might have only the 1, might not have like basically anything until after round 3. So it's more something to remember, to make sure you're on top of, and maybe don't load up on all the teams that have the round 3 buy. Just saying. So the other big thing, obviously, every time when it comes to SuperCoach is schedules. Obviously not as big of a thing versus some of the other sports that we've covered here on Jim Does SuperCoach, but it's more about the rule changes that we've seen for the ruck contests, the out of bounds rules and all these sorts of things. But really schedules, it still means that North Melbourne have the absolute ruck dominant schedule from heaven still for Tristan Cherry. But is he any good anymore as a SuperCoach ruckman? That's going to be the big question, isn't it? Because we've seen through preseason and like all this sort of, you know, lead up to this year, Cherry's unreal. Absolute dominating ruckman. One of the top 3 in the comp right now, especially like SuperCoach scoring. Like Grundy goes off his head down the stretch. Cherry ends off the season a couple of massive ones. But with these rule changes, can he keep that up? It's going to be really tough to judge because he's got this really great schedule. So I'm kind of still on board with keeping a little bit of the faith in Cherry and his ability like at ruckcraft and just being a giant bloody human being. So, but the schedules are also another thing for teams, right? You think about obviously the buys. That's one sort of part over here. But someone like Port Adelaide, they have an amazing early schedule, which I think they start off with North, Essendon, West Coast, and Richmond. Yes, sign me up, right? Like this is why Rosie and Butters are in everybody's team and why they've basically been in my team from day dot. As soon as the team picker came out, it's like bang, in they go. So outside of that, I also love Gold Coast early schedule. Like people are like, oh, Geelong. Look, schedules when it comes to SuperCoach, it's almost much more matchup based, really, than like sort of team based because there are still SuperCoach points to go around. Your roles will accumulate SuperCoach points, almost sort of beside the point for some of the, oh, this is a really tough team. Yeah, but this guy might still score 115 SuperCoach points. It doesn't matter. But if they're getting tagged, if they're playing like GWS, it's just weird things like that you have to keep an eye on. Like if you're playing the Saints or GWS, just, keep an eye on some of these matchups as you sort of start the season if you want to sort of really maximize the points that your rookies are going to make, but also your premos, right? So that's the big thing, I guess, when it comes to schedules. Like Essendon actually has like a half decent schedule. They play Hawthorn, yeah, a bit of a rough one, but then they've got Port and North. Then they've got like a Dogs game at Marvel. So there's these sorts of, and then Melbourne, right? So you look at someone like Darcy Parish or Dyson Sharp or even your man Zach Merritt, you might be feeling okay about that. And I actually tend to think that that's all right. So if you've got an easier kind of schedule, if you're like a middling sort of team, I feel a little bit more confident in that. If you're a good team with a half-decent schedule like Gold Coast, where they basically come into the year against Geelong tonight, but then West Coast, Richmond, that round 3 bye is a pain, but then they've got Melbourne after that, right? So I think the opposing team overall, keep it in mind, if you can play against some of these crummier teams, just say, keep an eye on that. Otherwise, structure, obviously guns and rookies is going to be the big thing. It always is, but this year, more so than just about any other year I can remember, there are so many really good mid-priced options that I think we're all being tempted into one or two of them, if not 3 or 4, if not bloody more. I have seen the teams that have just gone out there and gone full mid-pricer, which is kind of fun. It's like, all upside, baby! I mean, to a degree. Like, you look out the back, you've got Kitty Coleman, Caleb Windsor, Lockie Blackiston. You've got Hayden Young and Darcy Parish in the midfield. Harley Reid's at 381. Harvey Langford, Tanner Bruhn. One that I really like in the forward line, 428, Joel Frazier. He's just, it's almost a little bit too high mid-pricer. I'd almost have that as just a drop primo to a degree. Rochelle's at 369. Sam Lawler's at 298. So with all these mid-prices, like your structure can change dramatically for basically how you're feeling. And what we've seen, I think, over the last little bit is obviously Cherry's ownership dropping off the face of the planet. But rookies being rolled gold in SuperCoach, we understand this. The way that we've gone into round 0 and having a bit of a free look at some of these rookies, we're going to learn so much over this weekend and then going into the round 1 teams about who we can or can't play on the field, who we can and can't have on our bench, who's going to make us a bit of cash, how confident we feel in their role. We're going to learn a lot this weekend. Like we just saw Joe Sarong go absolutely fine yesterday against the Blues. Jagger Smith, he's in everybody's team. He was very good as well. But it's just sort of like something to keep in mind about like, all right, your structure and having some of these rookies there. Do we really need those high-priced rookies? That's been one of the big things we've sort of seen as the season has like gotten closer and closer and closer. Like the likes of Zeke and some of the other really sort of like that, Will Dersma, like the guys who are right there at that really pointy end of the rookie scale. I don't know. They've got to score a lot for you to justify paying $80,000 more for them on your team versus like somebody who's got like plenty of upside and will make a lot of cash at like a 117 price. So just something to keep thinking about. Anyway, that's enough of that. Like the structure, the way you set up your team is going to be the way you do it. There is no just absolute lock it in, do it this way approach for AFL SuperCoach. It's the beauty of it. The weirdest part, I think, this year is that there's a lot of strange consensus about some of the primos, which is based on history of scoring, some of these like slightly depressed prices, and then obviously like the way that some of these mid prices are coming through, you kind of like, well, maybe I can save a bit of cash here. And obviously having like someone like Lockie McAndrew as seemingly the Crows ruck du jour, like the Crom are just like, oh yeah, he'll just do it until we get Riley O'Brien going, I guess. Will Brodie was like another big one for pre-season. He's now sort of not playing and you're like, oh, I was really banking on that. But anyway, so build your team the way you want. We're going to learn a lot this week. It gives us all of next week to tinker, to change. We get teams next Wednesday, Thursday. It's going to be awesome. And then it's going to be all hands on deck. So what we're going to do for AFL SuperCoach this season here on Jim Does SuperCoach, we'll just do a weekly show similar to what we do with NBA. We'll probably drop it, I reckon, Wednesdays and sort of go out and just go, right, this is what happened last week. This is what we think might be happening next week. Lock in, right? So should be good. What went wrong? What went right? How we're going to get better. It's all we do here on Jim Does SuperCoach. We just want to get better, right? We're not going to be out here with spreadsheets and go, you need to have this guy like percentages, spreadsheets, percentages. We are firmly get better, have fun, SuperCoach rocks, right? So that's what we do here on Jim Does SuperCoach. Didn't matter if it was NFL, NBA, AFL. It's all about having a bit of fun and also being good and getting better. Right, so my team as it currently stands after so much tinkering, and obviously the week 0 opening game last night with Sarong on my team, on my bench was 77. I had Errol Goulden and Sam Walsh also in the midfield. Jagger Smith, feeling pretty good about that. Liam Reedy, 31. That's all the ones that I actually had from last night. But the way it stands, you've got the defenders in my team at the moment. I've got Naz, because everybody does, and they should. Connor Rozee was the next picked. The next one that I was fascinated by is you look at the way the GWS is sort of built. They lose Tom Green. You've got Toby Green playing a lot more through the middle. Everybody loves Kitty Coleman coming off his knee injury, 233. Caitlin Winslow, as I mentioned, 283. Can you save some cash as like a sort of fake primo with some of these guys? Kitty Coleman, I'm a little bit more tentative on, so he's not been in my team. He was initially. I'm a little bit more interested in Caleb Windsor. But of course, we don't see the Demons this week, so it's a bit frustrating. But he's probably one of my more, favorite looks as well. The same with Colby McKercher. I think I'm going to come down to this idea of maybe Colby McKercher for your Roos or GWS's Lockie Whitfield for the simple idea. I think, look, he has obviously, proven track record. Jack Sinclair is right there as well at 606K. Lockie's at 599. I'm always just going to be looking for that rebounding midfielder, half kind of, bounce back defender guy. And Whitfield averaged 110 last year. And I think if you sort of just look at his role, he's going to be really bloody important. He ripped off 176 to finish the season last year against the Saints. It's not bad. But Whitfield, I think, becomes like a big driving engine through that GWS defense and midfield. So I like the idea of Lockie Whitfield in there next to Rozee, but if it's not him, it's going to be Jack Sinclair, I reckon. He is obviously a weapon for the Saints. Can you go out there and get 2 Saints? I think the way that they play, there's plenty of possessions floating around. He was awesome in the back half of last season. 132, 128, 135, 95, 136 to finish off the year. Jack Sinclair feeling pretty good. So I reckon we'll sort of get a bit of a look at Whitfield's role this weekend. We'll see Sinclair as well against the Pies. Make the decision next week, but that's the top 3 at the moment. And I've sort of gone back and forth on my structure this year with basically the 3 defender primos. If I throw, let's just throw Sinclair in there at the right moment. With the way the rest of my team is set up, I've only got like 37K left over, which I could maybe spend elsewhere. We'll have a look. But out goes Zeke Ullin. Then 199K is a bit rough. Even Sam Grill on Richmond at 172K leaves me just a little bit, how you going? Because at 172, you're already spending, 55, 50 or 60K more than like a bottom-priced defensive rookie. And if you look at some of the ownership stats out there, obviously, Josh Lindsay for the Eagles was one of the ones that came in for me. I've also got Jacob Farrow. I've got, I think, Lockie Jacks. And we had, I think, Lockie Carmichael. We're just going all Lockies. And obviously, Jai Sarong. So that's the way it's been set up at the moment. After Ullin's gone out, Grill's gone out, I've sort of just gone to go a little bit cheaper, try to get a little bit more cash in the bank, try to get a little bit more upside in cash generation out of these defensive rookies. That's kind of where I've gone. So I think Lindsay at 122 versus Ullin at 199, you're just like, this is a very large price difference right off the bat. And Ullin has to do a lot of work to keep that sort of distance and like the cash generation versus someone like Lindsay or Farrow. Like Farrow at 163 is probably about the limit that I want to go to with some of these rookies. And but Jacques and Carmichael, I feel very good about them with the Dogs. And I mean, this will all come down to round 1 teams. But Sarong being on there as well already, pretty happy with that. Ripping off the 77 in week 0. I mean, the other ones out there, you sort of like look at some of the names that are like the big ownership numbers. Josh Gibkiss as well, coming off his knee injury. Wade Dirksen didn't get a game in round 0, so we don't know what's going to happen with him in round 1. Xavier Taylor for the Ds. I still kind of think the Richmond ones I want to like at least get a bit of a look in. The Sam Grill, the Gibkiss, their roles will be solid. I just worry about their cash-making upside versus some of the cheaper options, right? Whereas Farrow, I just love him. Again, this comes down to my idea about the Essendon schedule. I think he'll get plenty of the pill. He'll be awesome. So I think Lindsay comes in. So I think my defenders at the moment are Naz, either Sinclair/Whitfield, whoever, Rosie. 3 rookies on field. Sarong will probably start on field for round 1 after he's 77 at the moment. Lindsay, Farrow, Jacques, and Carmichael. How do we feel about that? I feel like we could probably... I'm fascinated by Blackiston on Essendon as well. I think if you like Kitty Coleman, obviously as well, not a bad one. If I can maybe finagle some other stuff around and get Caleb Windsor there as like D4, I'd probably feel a little bit better. That might happen next week. This is how it stands at the moment. For my midfielders, Zach Butters, Matt Rowell, Errol Gordon, Sam Walsh. Then we have a pretty interesting question mark. I had Caleb Sarong in my team. I really liked his price. I was feeling like, the Freo is at 571. You think around that exact moment, like that's where like Lockie Neal is, Jack McRae, Will Ashcroft. Will Ashcroft was one of the first guys I brought in. At 545, I'm not entirely convinced about maybe some of the Brisbane stuff this year. Right off the bat, but we get the free look at them over the weekend. So Will might come straight in for Sarong at the moment. But the other one that I sort of kicked the tires on is probably Zach Merritt. Maybe, just maybe, if we can get perhaps a Max Holmes or something like that. But look, Sarong has been the placeholder for the minute. I like Will Ashcroft a little bit more. Next up, I had obviously Sam Walsh with Goulden as well. In like those are the 2 guys at like that 566, 543 mark. Felt great after round 0, right? Like lock and load, happy they're already in my team. Then I've got Darcy Parish at 334. That's the mid-price madness spot. I just like his role. I like his ability to get plenty of the ball. Sometimes can butcher it. We get that, but at 334, I think his upside as that mid-pricer is pretty massive. Hayden Young already dealing with other injuries, so I felt better about Parish than Young. Again, we'll see what happens over the weekend with some of these other mid-pricers, but Parish versus like Harley Reid was in the team for a little bit, felt okay about that. Tanner Bruhn is the other interesting one as well. We're going to see Geelong tonight, but Parish for the minute, love that, ahead of the rookies. Jagger Smith had 65 against the Swans, Dyson Sharp, Jack Carroll, Blamirez for North, and Will Brodie is still sitting there. And like, I was so pumped to have him at 119. If you remember, he was a gun on Freo a couple of years ago and comes over with Josh Carr as the new coach there in Port Adelaide and doesn't play the last practice game. So yeah, what are the other options there? Really, if Will Brodie doesn't play, it's going to get pretty thin on the ground. You look at some of the ownership stats. Will Brodie's at 37% at the moment. Jagger is at an amazing 83%. Arthur Jones, I don't know if I trust his sort of role. I've already got Sid Draper in my forward line. I think if you like Jack Watkins, if he ends up playing for Port, he's owned by 10% of coaches. He's at 99,000. That's not bad. It gets pretty light on. Chase Jones has been another name that's been thrown around for the Crom. I really hope that Brodie gets a run because I don't trust Arthur Jones. Leon Kickett at 99, not bad. Ollie Greaves as well at 99. There's a few floating around. We'll know a little bit more though after round 1. So that's how we rolled at the moment with Butters, Rowell, that sort of Sarong, Merritt, Will Ashcroft spot, the one that I'm going to decide through the next week. Goulden, Walsh, Parish, Sharp, Smith, Will Brodie, Jack Carroll, and Blamirez. Now the rucks. What are we doing with the rucks? The new rules are fascinating. So what are you doing around the ground? I love the idea of TDK. I do not love the fact that he left my beloved Blues, but I did see him at the cafe down the road from me. I didn't try to talk to him and convince him to stick around. Maybe that's why he didn't stick around. He's like, wow, that ginger bloke in the Carlton hat never spoke to me about staying for the Blues. He must not have liked me. I better go to St Kilda. But anyway, he's at 524. I think the way that the Saints use TDK is going to be fascinating. We get a free look this week, obviously. But again, it feels like a lot of the Supercoach and ruck stuff this year will be rewarding the likes of Luke Jackson, TDK, the ones that are sort of used around the ground, have that extra little bit of athleticism. You saw Brody Grundy. Grundy last night ripped off 112. Not bad. Pitto had 108 as well. Snagged a couple of goals in there. But TDK, Luke Jackson, the guys who get used in other sorts of roles as well. I'm fascinated to see how this rolls out through week 0. Tim English is another big one as well. He gets a run this weekend. And obviously, look, at the moment, I've got Cherry and TDK in my rucks with our man, Lachlan McAndrew in my flex, because it just means that you can move folks around with Reedy in the forward line. My R3 at the moment is just Mitch Edwards for Geelong. He's just there at the moment. There's a couple of other cheapies that we can throw in there. Obviously, with the Eagles, well, you got Kalani White, who's at 99K. You got the Brisbane Lions, Zane Zakatelski. There's a couple of other ones floating around, but yeah, for the minute, I'm just going to leave Mitch Edwards in there and away we go. But Cherry and De Koning, it's an interesting mix, I think, because you got Cherry, the dominating ruckman, who I still believe in, and I think with his matchups can still put up huge numbers. And TDK, the guy who these rules might really benefit, and Supercoach scoring around the ground might really help him out. So he might be a little bit of a cheaper, fun option. But if you look at some of the other big names, obviously going around in rucks, the ones that you look at Max Gawn, 689, I feel like he'll just probably dip a little bit. Luke Jackson, I do love at 611. I don't think I can, it's either basically for me, it's between Cherry and Jackson because I think TDK should score okay, especially at his price point. But TDK, we at least get a look at this week. Luke Jackson, love his role. Tim English is the other one. So TDK is R2, Cherry R1. And in the forwards, I've got Sheasel. I love the Sheasel. Petrarca at 522 for Gold Coast. Again, we get to look at him tonight. Stupid, sexy Sam Flanders at 396, my other mid-pricer. I've got the two of them in my team this year. Matthias Philippou is at F4. I like the idea of his role just expanding a little bit. I love that he's priced at 168. I think he's going to make a bit of cash, is Matthias. Sid Draper for the Crom at 126K. He's in my F5 at the moment. I didn't really like too many of the other options around that sort of price point. So I think if you look at the sort of other forward rookies and the ownership percentages, Leo Lombard is another big one. And I guess when it comes down to the Eagles, you've also got Finn McRae there. Todd Marshall's another option at 147. So I feel like ahead of Sid Draper, like Sid Draper at 126, I'm probably going to he's kind of sitting there at the moment just because I want to see like a little bit of his role. But I kind of prefer him over Arthur Jones. I wouldn't mind seeing how Leo goes in this opening round. At 119, though, I do love the price. I'm just saying. So Todd Marshall is also the good one there. I can slot him in just at 147. And Devin Robinson's at F6 ahead of Liam Reedy and Finn McRae on the bench for the Eagles. So it feels like we've gone pretty top heavy with some of these, having Rosie, Sinclair, / Whitfield, Naz, Butters, Matt Rowell, Goulden, Walsh. It does feel like the forward line of having the two Primos and the stupid sexy Flanders and then three kind of rookie prices. Philippou, I'm kind of hoping has a decent year. Marshall, I feel like can skyrocket in price as well. So I feel like those two, so if we just piss off Sid Draper for the minute and put Todd Marshall in there, I feel a little bit more confident we're going to score some more points here. But as I mentioned, Joel Frazier, I think, is a guy who's going to score plenty of points this year. Rochelli's another really good option for a mid-pricer there. I like Flanders a lot. Sam Lawler, I think at 298 is a really interesting one too. But that starting price for him, it'll be interesting to see how he goes. So there we go. It's probably on the screen there, but Lachlan McAndrew is my flex. I think that leaves me with bang on 4.6K in the bank. So I've gone right to the edge with this. So to recap, defenders, Naz, Sinclair / Whitfield, depending on how we go this weekend. Rosie, Lindsay, Farrow, Jax, Carmichael, and Sarong in the defence. Midfielders, you got Butters, Rowell. That decision looming of Zeret / Sarong / Will Ashcroft. Whoa, Errol Goulden, Sammy Walsh, Darcy Parish, Dyson Sharp, Jagger Smith. Then the bench of Will Brodie for the minute. That should be his actual full name. Jack Carroll and Blamirez for North. Rucks, R1 is Cherry, R2 is TDK. I've got Mitch Edwards on the bench. Forwards, Shees, Petrarca, Stupid Sexy Flanders, Philippou. Todd Marshall comes in for Sid Draper. Devon Robinson. I like his role there with the West Coast Eagles. I think he'll get plenty of run. Liam Reedy had 31 against the Swans. Not bad. I mean, see how he keeps on going. And then Finn McRae as my F6. And then Lachlan McAndrew as the flex, just so you can switch dudes around, right? We'll see how he goes. But there you go. That's the AFL SuperCoach team reveal for week 0, which will change, I think, dramatically heading into week 1. But let us know what you reckon. What are we missing out on? Who should we be kicking the tires on? I think you look at Gold Coast, like Matt Rowell might be he's at my, mid M2. We'll figure out what's going on with him. I think basically these are the ones I sort of threw in there, chopped and changed a bit. It'll keep chopping and changing into next week, but let us know what you reckon. So there you go. That is the first AFL SuperCoach, Jim Does SuperCoach, the team reveal. Talk it all out. Let us know what you reckon. Jump in the comments on the YouTube. Smash the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. It's 2026. You know what to do by now. But there you go. That's it. Jim Does SuperCoach. We've also got NBA SuperCoach rolling out every Monday too. We've got NBA Australia every day. Go check that out. And we've got Footy Unfilterated, our new AFL footy show. Go subscribe to that and check it out everywhere too. All right, until we get into next week when we set up week 1, this is Jim Does SuperCoach. Happy SuperCoaching.